Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Callie Batts-Maddox, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Sports Leadership and Management here at Miami University. And every semester, I teach a class on the sociocultural study of sport, and I include a unit about disability and adaptive sport and the Paralympics and the Invictus Games. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here tonight with our guests. I'm so excited to welcome you to tonight's webinar about the Fresh Tracks documentary, produced by alumna Katie Leimkuehler, class of 2007. Hopefully you all had the chance to view the documentary. And tonight we'll discuss the film and have the chance to ask Katie and her co-executive producer, Jeremy Snyder, questions about adaptive skiing and the Fresh Tracks documentary. Katie is the executive producer of Fresh Tracks, and she is the granddaughter of Paul Leimkuehler. Katie is the CEO of Leimkuehler Media and is an expert branding storyteller. She's a board member of Cleveland Together Digital and was recently awarded Northeast Ohio Movers and Shakers Top 25 Under 35 Award in 2019. Jeremy Snyder is an executive producer, director, and co-CEO at TFA Group. His achievements include directing the 2018 documentary feature Empty Net, USA Sled Hockey's Journey of Redemption. Jay leads the development and production of TV, film, and branded content projects tied to the development and growth of the Paralympic movement, adaptive sports, disability rights advocacy, with a focus on changing perception and raising awareness. Thanks to all of you who submitted questions ahead of time, and we also want your participation live. So feel free to ask questions using the Ask a Question button below the video, and we'll try to answer as many as we can tonight. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Katie and Jay.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yes, thank you very much. We're honored to be here with you all.
And I think before we get started, if you guys weren't able to catch the film, we wanted to share the trailer with all of you so you can get an idea of the storyline in case you weren't able to watch it yet.
After my injury, I didn't want to stop being an athlete.
I was injured in Iraq during a roadside bomb attack.
The whole idea of my father figuring out for amputees to ski, that is part of his legacy.
It's amazing. The outrigger design really hasn't changed.
It's not just about accomplishing my dreams, but it's about making other people realize theirs.
My grandfather's legacy is one of very high standards.
He was a lieutenant in the war.
A piece of shrapnel bounced off a wall, and all of a sudden he felt something warm in his leg, and it was sliced open his thigh, the whole length of it.
I think my dad tried every sport he could after he lost his leg to see what could work and what wouldn't.
So my father was the first amputee skier. Nobody else was doing it.
So without the outriggers, we just wouldn't be out here skiing. You think they're pretty simple, but they are really vital to what we do as adaptive skiers.
We really love being part of this movement, seeing the pioneers like a Paul Leimkuehler.
Really, when it comes down to it, all of our equipment is technology-based.
I mean, I want to be known for the equipment that I've designed that helps other athletes step up their performance game. And we get more athletes involved in it and really pushing themselves, taking on these challenges instead of shying away and saying, I can't do that.
Just to be here to share Paul's legacy, it's beyond touching.
Anytime you can get out of your wheelchair, you get that adrenaline rush, and there's absolutely nothing like skiing.
We're making Fresh Tracks, it's all new again. I mean, they're starting over, and you're painting that canvas every time by making these Fresh Tracks.
Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and start with some questions. Katie, let's start with you. What inspired you to tell this story, and why was it important to share?
So I kind of grew up always hearing about my grandfather. He passed away when I was around 8 years old. So I've always heard the stories about him growing up, and it just never left me. When you hear about someone doing something so incredible, learning to ski on one leg, having never skied on two, it kind of challenges you to look at life from a different perspective and, problem solve with your own challenges and come up with solutions. So knowing how much it had impacted me in the way I viewed life, I really wanted to share that with others and inspire them, to take ownership of their own lives, to overcome obstacles that they might not think they could overcome. So that's really the theme, and what we hope to kind of highlight in the film is that you can reimagine your challenges as opportunities.
And how about you, Jay? Why were you interested in helping to tell the story that's presented in this film? Why did you want to be involved?
Sure. Well, Katie had reached out, I think it was March of 2019. We got an email one morning, woke up, and she was sharing some background on her grandfather and the story and what she had already kind of pulled together in development. And we're always seeking new projects and new opportunities. And this one was perfect. The story, the history of adaptive sports with grandfather, I hadn't been told before. And I think it's so important to share the history and how far we've come and kind of where it started and where it's going. And so, we spent a lot of time on the present and the athletes today and what they're doing today and their stories. But a lot of the athletes, hadn't heard about Paul Leimkuehler and where the outrigger was developed or who started kind of the adaptive skiing movement. And here we go. We have the grandfather of it all. So it was, when we got the project, my wife and I, who's the co-CEO as well, said, we need to be a part of this. This is something that's, this is perfect. This is right up our alley. And I think later that day or the next day, we jumped on the phone with Katie.
So Jay, as a producer, from that perspective of the producer, why do you think it's important to create stories like this and to capture these types of narratives?
Sure. For us at TFA, it's all about storytelling and purpose-driven content. And we have a lens around disability. My wife was injured 12 years ago, was paralyzed. And it was because of media that she was exposed. It was a newspaper article that she was exposed to the Paralympic movement and adaptive sports. If she didn't come across that newspaper article, what would have happened? And for us, we want to remove luck out of it, and we want to flood the market with more content, more opportunities to help educate, raise awareness, so that through the power of storytelling, we could change perception of disability in our society. And what better way through media and sports, combine that together and show possibility, as Katie was saying. So we get excited about these stories because we've seen it change lives time and time again. And with our two films that are out there now, it's pretty amazing to see, and hear directly that, hey, my neighbor or my son or my daughter or my friend didn't know about skiing or didn't know about adaptive snowboarding or sled hockey. And because of those films, it changed our life. And that drives us every single day.
I think that visibility is so crucial and so important. I speak to my students about this idea of being temporarily able-bodied, that we never know what's going to happen. And we need to ensure that we have the information, we have that visibility, that we know what opportunities are out there.
Well, the disability population is one that you can join at a moment's notice.
Right.
Time. So.
Absolutely. Now, Katie, how did you learn to produce a documentary? How did you gain these skills?
Well, that's a great question. So I don't have a background in film, so it was definitely a learning process. I would say, naive optimism served me well because it was quite a venture. And I don't know that I would have gone down the path if I had known everything that was entailed. But it was a lot of talking to people. So that was probably the most helpful thing, since I didn't have a background in film. Over a course of several years, I talked to filmmakers, producers, that made documentaries to learn the ins and outs and how they did it. How did they tell the story? Who did they work with? How did they film it? And that was kind of my shortcut into film, was learning from people who had gone before, and then what lessons they took away, and that I could impact on my own journey. So it was really helpful, just learning from other people and understanding, that there wasn't quite a straight path, that there were many paths to take. Usually we think, just do X, Y, and Z and you'll get these results. And that wasn't the case. There was a lot of different ways to go about it. So before I met Jay, I had talked to all these different filmmakers to learn the best process. And I originally did write it as a screenplay. So before I made it as a documentary, my background in writing, starting at Miami, I learned journalism and creative writing there. And then I wrote it as a screenplay and wanted to take more ownership of it than maybe having it distorted if it did get picked up. So that's why I moved into the documentary phase. And I was watching Empty Net one night, which is one of Jay's films from the TFA group on Amazon Prime about the Paralympic sled hockey team. And that is how I found him. So instead of trying to think through, okay, I want to find the best team locally or in these different markets where we are filming, I wanted to find the right partner. And that was someone that understood, what we were trying to do with this film, the message, what we wanted to highlight. And so that's when I reached out to him and we started working together.
Now, a question for you both. What advice would you give first-time filmmakers who might want to jump out into this world and have an idea?
I think I would say be flexible and open-minded. Have a lot of patience. It's a long journey, and you have to be really determined to see it through. There's probably going to be several roadblocks, and you have to be willing to believe in yourself, the story, what you're trying to do, to really get it completed. Because I know a lot of people have given up on documentaries that I talked to, or just couldn't get enough pulled together. And I would say if you have a strong enough story or vision, that will pull you through all those difficult times. So being flexible and having a strong story really will keep you going through it.
Yeah, and kind of building off of Katie and the flexibility is a good mentor of mine always says, there are no stop signs, only detours. So when there's roadblocks, just shift and adapt and move forward. Because there's going to be a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of hurdles. There's going to be a lot of things that are out of our control. And I mean, right now we're living through one, a pandemic, and we're so fortunate that we were able to finish the film and premiered it literally before the world shut down. And, and Katie had been on such a journey prior to meeting us. And for us, it's okay, if there's a stop sign and there's a hurdle, how do we move around it? How do we push past it? And kind of having that resilience to never give up on that. That's, if this is your passion, you believe in it, as Katie was mentioning, you'll find your way through to the end.
Now, Jay, what was something that surprised you when making this film?
The amount of archival footage that the family had was
cool.
Incredible. It's not something you
Really
find
cool.
every single day. Yeah, I mean, we had film from, Katie's family found film from the 50s that her grandfather was, he was his own Hollywood producer. And being able to go through that footage was remarkable. It really helped make the film and take us back and put us in the moment with their grandparents and tell the love story, tell their story together. So you have those flashbacks that pretty much all that footage was footage that the family still saved. And when we flew to Cleveland and spent a week out there, they had all the old photos laid out. It was like a museum. It was incredible. So for us, having all that archived footage was, it helped make the film.
Yeah.
Katie, did you know the extent of the footage that your family had?
So we knew he had a lot. Like, my grandfather was an amateur videographer himself, and he was, really into documenting videos, photos, everything, and letters. So we had a pretty good idea, but then there was footage that we had never saw that we actually got converted and digitized. That was amazing, of him skiing, like shooting from the chairlift, like things that, in the 40s and 50s, who was doing that? And it's also in color, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, all of the great shots were mostly from him. And he just had, I guess, a passion for it. In addition to skiing, he loved, film as well.
That's incredible. Great stuff. Oh. So, Katie, in your role at Schwab, you coach people on branding and marketing. And did this skill come in handy when you were producing the film? Is there any overlap?
Yeah, definitely. I think a good story is a good story no matter what platform it's on. And so, social media, marketing, branding, it all comes down to storytelling, just like film. So being able to tell the story of making the film has been a huge component as well. So I've always shared it on, social media, LinkedIn, different networks. We're all over, but that documenting the process is also part of the story of telling this film. And that's what I teach people, is how to build their brands at Schwab, their personal individual brands. And so that has obviously come into play with this film of how to build our social media brand, our marketing brand, our film brand as well. And then of course with the story. So just having a strong story that people are compelled with, I think is really key no matter the platform.
Absolutely. Now, can you also tell us a little bit about your undergraduate days at Miami? You were a creative writing and journalism major, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And how did those two really help you throughout this process? Did you find yourself sort of drawing on your experience at Miami?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think first of all, I loved Miami. I had a great experience at Miami, of course, like everybody. But having that background, that strong writing background, put me a step ahead of, I think, where maybe most people making a documentary start, because I had a clear vision of my story and in fact had written it as a screenplay. And then from there, I kind of outlined step by step the scenes I wanted to make into the documentary. So I had this really clear vision of like, I wanted, the war scene, I wanted the love scenes, the technology today scenes. So I think Miami really helped me build on those writing strengths, and I wouldn't definitely have gotten to where I am today without it, because those strengths, both the writing and journalism, have launched my career in different ways, and pulling on that throughout this film process has been really strong. And everyone has always commented back like, wow, this is really great writing on the outline. Like, it was very clear where I wanted to go, which I think is different than some documentaries, but really helpful in our process. So we knew the direction we wanted to take the story. It was much easier for the team to film that with this kind of vision in mind.
Jay, I have a question for you that I'm very curious about. So when you were interviewing the Paralympic and adaptive athletes in the film, did they know who Paul was, or did they know anything about his story? What was their perspective on him if they were familiar with him?
Sure. There was a couple of them kind of knew of. I would say the older adaptive athletes, Bob Meserve, who was in there, kind of heard of him, was a little bit familiar with him. The younger athletes, Mike Schultz, who was featured, Andrew Kurka, who was in there, hadn't. And it was pretty amazing, as Katie was mentioning, when she had originally sent kind of the screenplay, the outline of the doc, she had Andrew Kurka in there, Mike Schultz in there, featured. And those are two athletes, part of our company. We represent Paralympic athletes as well on the branding and marketing side. And we work with the two of them. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. We're aligned here. When I shared the story of Paul, they were blown away. And Paul was Mike Schultz, back in the 50s and 60s and what he did. And now Mike is kind of carrying that torch forward with his technology and what he's doing with his company at Biodapt. But I think they love to hear the history, because for them, there's nowhere, they can't go find it. Now with this film, they could see kind of where it started. And for them, it's important for them to now carry the torch forward and be a part of the change for the next 30 to 40 years. So I know they really enjoyed hearing about Paul, learning about him, seeing, I know last year we had Mike Schultz, a part of the panel at up in Breckenridge for a premiere at Ski Spec. And so for him to see it all come together, he really, really enjoyed learning more about Paul and the family.
Those connections, I think, are fascinating. And within Paralympic sport, there's so many connections, even sort of the origin story of Paralympic sport now kind of coming full circle with the military programs. I think very interesting connections, that common thread.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Katie, what was one of your favorite stories about your grandfather that you learned by making this film? Would you mind sharing one with us?
Sure. So this one didn't make it in the film, but I think it's probably one of my favorite stories I heard about him. So this was something we found through filming. We're interviewing my cousin Greg, and he said he had recently run into a former patient of my grandfather, and the patient was telling him the first time he visited my grandfather, and he said he was an amputee as well, and he came in to his office, and it was on the second floor because it was his first office, so it wasn't, it wasn't handicap friendly quite yet because he was just starting out. So he crutched in and came into his office and got fit for a leg, and he was about to leave and he took it off, and my grandfather goes, "Why are you taking that off? Like, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'll put it on at home. I'm not ready to put it on yet." And he's asking why, and he just said, "My granddaughter's or my daughter's getting married next month, and I want to make sure I can dance at the wedding." And so my grandpa had seen this before. He also was an amputee, though most people couldn't tell because he walked so well. And so he actually took his crutches, threw them out the window, and said, "You're walking out of here with me. We're walking out together, and you're going to definitely dance at your daughter's wedding," which is exactly what happened. And I just think that speaks volumes to the person he was, because it wasn't just, "You're my patient." He was in it with them. And I love that story. I think it just highlighted who he was as a person.
It's a great story. And this kind of ties in to build on this a little bit. But what is one of the best life lessons that you've learned from your grandfather? That sounded like a good one right there.
Yeah, there's so many. I would say probably persistence. He didn't go, I don't know, he just always kept going forward. Like, he didn't live in the norm. He challenged society. He challenged the norms of society, like, especially at a time where, being an amputee was kind of looked upon differently. And so I would say one of the best things he taught me was just to take action on the things that you want to do and not worry about what other people think. Just go after it. And he lived that. He definitely lived that through starting 2 businesses in prosthetics without having a background in it, teaching himself to ski without having skied on 2 legs before that. Like, there was nothing that he couldn't do if he decided to do it. And so I try and, capture that in my mind whenever I have a challenge and say, okay, if he can do this, then I can do it. Obviously, even now in a time where technology and we have all these advantages, and he didn't have that. So I would just say he taught me persistence to go after what I want.
Jay, how do you see adaptive sports evolving in the film industry? What are you looking towards in the future?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd love to see more films out there, both documentaries and feature films, scripted films that are highlighting all sports. And we're putting adaptive sports on the same level as kind of mainstream, where we have the likes of Netflix and Peacock and NBC, and you're seeing it mainstream. And it's told in a way of, like, you watch Empty Net, it's the Miracle on Sleds, and that it's kind of the Miracle on Ice for us, but we call it Miracle on Sleds. When you watch that and how we tell it, it's told in a way of a true sports documentary. And for us, I think the more we can, like, as I mentioned earlier, flood the market with content about adaptive sports and the power of adaptive sports, the stories, and then telling them not only in inspirational ways, but aspirational, empowering ways that everybody can connect with. And I think right now, as we're all living through a pandemic and the challenges, and one of the lines from Paul is take advantage of a disadvantage. And we're all faced with adversity right now, but what are we doing with that? And how are we moving forward? And adaptive athletes, Paralympic athletes, you know what? They know how to adapt and they know how to overcome. And the stories of resilience are so empowering, and we can all learn from that. We can all learn and take that into our own life, and how do we move forward? And I think sharing those stories, we need more of it, and we need to see it on ESPN, and we need to see those power of sports, and told in a way that aren't the not necessarily tug at your heartstrings of kind of the whole, well, it's so inspirational, but no, they're empowering. It's a sports story, regardless, whatever it is. And that's how we kind of took with Fresh Tracks, as you saw, the cinematography, the music, the storylines. Paul was an empowering individual, and he broke the norms. And back then, as Katie was mentioning, disability was looked on much differently than it is in 2020. We still have our challenges, and we still need to push the norm. We need to normalize disability. but he took it head on. And that's how we need to, take our films and media in general is hit it head on.
What do you think it's going to take in terms of media coverage to put the athlete first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the disability first, to put the athlete first when we're covering Paralympic sport, adaptive sport?
Sure. I think we're getting there. Our team and colleagues at NBC are doing a phenomenal job, and the support that we're getting from brands like Toyota, Comcast, Procter & Gamble, and others that have come on and seeing the athlete first and sharing those stories and really getting behind that. We need to do more. Everybody knows that. I think here we are in 2020 as we look to the 28 games in LA. I think that's a good roadmap. I think there's some really good plans that we have in place to get there. But it's athlete first. And it's, we're trying to do our part. I know we're one small production studio here in Minneapolis, but, we're trying to, as we call TFA, it's a group of people. And Katie and her team and others and our team behind Fresh Tracks. It's, we didn't just go after and hire a director or DP or editors that create just adaptive films. And I say just adapt because we want to go after the best and people that create Oscar nominated films and Emmy nominated films and projects. So I think it's, challenging us to seek higher opportunities for that.
I think the power of sport combined with the power of film, incredibly significant.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The opportunity that could be there. Yeah. Katie, one last question for you. What's the goal or vision that you have for this film? What kind of impact do you hope it has?
I guess our goal is, to have people watch it and think, oh, I can do more than I think. Like I said at the beginning, we want people to reimagine their challenges as opportunities instead of seeing things like unsolvable or something that they might not be able to overcome, but to see it with that adaptive lens. Like, how can I do this? How can I do it differently or better? Just like my grandfather, lost his leg and he didn't sit around and, think, oh, this is terrible. He built his own leg. Like, how can we do that in life? How can we get back out there and overcome something that maybe we didn't think we could do before? In the film, this is one of my favorite features in the film and in the book, The Men of Company K, where he writes his story about this in there. Like in the Battle of the Bulge, he asked for his leg to be taken off. Like he asked for it to be taken off because he knew that it was time and like we need to move on. And I think that mindset, the mindset of looking at something like, all right, let's tackle this next challenge, let's move to the next chapter, is rare. And I think that's something I wanted to highlight and empower other people to kind of see life through that lens.
Wonderful. Well, I could go on and ask you a million questions from my own perspective here, but I want to give our viewers a chance to ask some questions. So I'm going to take some questions from the live Q&A. Thanks to you all again for watching. Feel free to jump in and add your questions in. Okay, so here's a question we have. I was so struck by the great job your grandparents did chronicling their lives. What do you think inspired them to take all those movies and write such detailed journals?
Well, I think at the time, that was it was a different time, right? So a lot of people there was no technology, so that was kind of the way to highlight your life. But I also think they wanted to capture the joys of life, the small things that maybe people overlooked. And I think they were kind of old-fashioned in that way. They wanted to remember everything and they wanted to highlight it and they wanted to share that joy with others. So I think that's why they took a lot of the movies, because my grandfather wanted to show people, hey, you can ski, hey, you can walk, you can do these things like I can. And I think that was his way of passing that along to others.
I keep encouraging my students to keep a journal right now during the pandemic. So write it down. You will want to remember what's happening. Now your family will want to know what you went through during this time. So yeah, that sort of chronicling of your own life is so important. Another question here. Prosthetics and orthotics seems to be a family affair. Do you see this being a long-time family legacy and business?
Absolutely. So it kind of still is at the moment. So I have my dad and my 3 uncles are all in their prosthetic businesses, and they all have kids in it. So I think there's like 7 or 8 of my cousins, and my brother named Paul from the film is also in prosthetics. And it's such a family passion. I think everyone really enjoys helping people and helping them walk, and getting that, getting their life back on track is such a amazing thing to be a part of. So I definitely do see that continuing, I'm sure, throughout the many years ahead, that it will probably still remain in the family, hopefully, and we'll be able to help patients all over.
Now, how did you all get funding for the project?
So we worked with a bunch of different prosthetic companies and people in the industry. So my grandpa was pretty well known in the prosthetic industry. He was on the board of ABC and all these different prosthetic organizations. So we reached out to them and different prosthetic companies that sponsored the initial funding of the film. And they, helped us get filming in Breckenridge and Colorado and all over that we filmed. And then, TFA Group came in as well and helped fund the film. So it was kind of from a bunch of different sources. And that's kind of how it happened.
And could you discuss? Oh, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Katie did a phenomenal job of bringing on sponsors. That's kind of the biggest thing for independent films and documentaries, is finding that early money, finding the sponsors to kind of come in and really help underwrite the projects. And, for us, having a team that really believes in it and getting it out there. Now our goal is to really get distribution and get global distribution out there in a big way, so many more people can watch the film.
Yeah, we're actually on Amazon Prime now. So if anyone hasn't watched it, they can watch it there, and Vimeo On Demand, which is available globally. So if anyone is interested in sharing the film or with other people, we can send that link out to you guys to share with others as well.
That's great. Wonderful. Could you both discuss the process of filming a bit more? Where was it shot? How long did it take? How many people were involved?
Sure. Katie, you want me to take this one? Start with it?
Yeah.
So when Katie approached us, she had done some filming, some of the interviews in Cleveland that we were able to work with. But then as we looked at what we needed to shoot, we realized we needed some scenes, some winter scenes. And now we were talking, this was now in May, going, okay, if we want the film to be out by December, how are we going to do this? Well, we started looking at the schedule and the weather, and we were so fortunate that we shot over Memorial Day weekend in A Basin in Colorado with 2 feet of fresh powder and bluebird skies. And I have an incredible team out in Denver that we brought on for this. Hans Rosenwinkel, director, DP, and who's the editor, lives out in Denver, knows all the backcountry skiing, A Basin, all that stuff. So we put wheels in motion probably a week and a half prior. I wasn't able to travel out there. Katie flew out, was with the crew. We had a couple of the guys, audio and a second camera, but they're very comfortable skiing. Hans is, as Katie can attest to, flies down the mountain backwards, camera between his legs. We have a drone flying. It was pretty incredible. And the scenes that I got to see, and Katie was sending me some behind the scenes photos and videos, were remarkable. So we were so fortunate. And one of those things is Paul's looking down. Paul is truly looking down at us and giving us this incredible blessing to go out and film these incredible scenes. And from there, we kind of looked ahead. We had another shoot backcountry to get kind of the fresh tracks that you saw in the trailer. Went out to Cleveland and spent a week with the family. And, I think it's taken the vision that Katie had, and then it's project management. It's figuring out, okay, how do we bring this to life? And then building out the calendar from there.
Yeah, and I will say, filming in Colorado, these were all-day shoots, so they were long, early days with the athletes, interviewing them at the National Center for Disabled Sports. So that's where we did all the interviews, one-on-one with a lot of people. And then, we went out to A Basin. So it was an all-day ski shoot, and I really give the athletes a lot of credit because I don't know if they knew that coming into shooting. So they stuck with us, and we were fortunate to have some incredible snow in basically summer, which was a huge blessing. And then, we had amazing drone footage. So it was really cool to ski resort actually shut down. So we could, at the end of the day, film the drone footage and get it where there was no one else in the mountains. So that was pretty incredible to be a part of. And yes, our director Hans is, he is just the most driven, hardworking guy you've ever met. And he would shoot all day if he could. He would get every shot, like, do it again. Let's get this turn. So we were fortunate enough to have him and have some amazing footage from that.
And any particular challenges you faced throughout the process?
I would say timing, having enough time. You always want more time. And, for us, we had a deadline, and it was premiering at Ski Spec December 12th, Katie, I think 2019, last December. And we were up against that date, and there was no moving the date, and we had to have it ready. So the challenge is having enough time. There's never enough time because you always want to tinker with the story, fix it, and all that. But as Katie got to see firsthand, it's a process of how it goes from filming and then taking all that footage of all those terabytes that we have and bringing it into a post-production with Hans. And then we had a post-production house, Milk House in Denver, of massaging that. And, we had a post-production producer, Mo Finn, and kind of helping tell the story. And then from there, a music composer. So it's an original score that we had done for the film, and then kind of bringing all those pieces together. So that way, when we sat on the evening of December 12th, the film aired, there were no glitches, everything ran smoothly. But I would say the biggest challenge is having enough time.
Yeah, and I would say, as far as film goes, I think this is a very quick turnaround. So we partnered up in March 2019, and we were done by December and premiered in December. So to get all those interviews, all that footage, and everything done and edited for that premiere was, really incredible. And I think pretty amazing to see that we were able to have such a impactful film in such a short period of time and pull it all together.
Some hard, efficient work happening there.
As Katie mentioned, Hans doesn't like to sleep, which thus we can't sleep during these projects. So so he kind of helps drive, and we push, and we did what we needed to do. And I'm so thankful we did. Now looking back, knowing that it's finished, and then obviously 2020 hit and everything with 2020. But for us to be able to now share it, and we were in 3 film festivals. We were definitely bummed to not be in person at the film festivals, but luckily we were nominated in 3, and now we're able to share the film with everybody.
Now, kind of a broader question here. Where do you see the future of adaptive skiing and sports going? What can we hope for in the future?
I would just say I hope it continues to evolve. It's amazing to see the design, the outrigger design that my grandfather used is still kind of the baseline of what a lot of adaptive skiers are using today. And as you see with Mike Schultz in the film, like, he's taking it to a whole next level by developing, a knee for just adaptive athletes. And I think in the future, we can only expect things hopefully to continue to evolve and get even better.
Yeah, and I would echo that, and just say greater access to sports equipment. So the mono skis that you saw in the film, and I wish they were cheaper. I mean, those rigs are 10,000 plus the price of some cars, and for us getting greater access and opportunities for individuals to be out and active, whether it's mono skis, arm bikes. An individual, my wife, we can't go to the local bike shop and go buy a bike off the rack. It's got to be custom made, and it takes 3 to 4 months. And it's at a price tag that it's cost prohibitive. And so those are things that you can't do. So you start looking at activities that maybe don't have equipment or such. But I think, we're starting to see greater opportunities, greater access. You got companies like the Hartford. The Hartford has created a campaign called Ability Equipped, where they're supporting organizations like Move United, who supported the film screening at Ski Spec with millions of dollars to buy more equipment so people can have access. And whether it's young individuals, older individuals, veterans, it's creating those opportunities. But I hope that one day, a young Mallory can go into a bike shop and there's a arm bike hanging and they could buy it right off the rack.
Yeah. Do you think I'm going to add in my own question here real quick? I know that last year the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee equalized the medal bonuses. So finally, after years and years, so previously Olympic athletes received much higher medal bonuses than Paralympic athletes. Do you think this equalization, this commitment for financial support will help with that access, will help to ensure that adaptive athletes, Paralympic athletes can pursue their passions and pursue sport as what they do, right? Without that financial hurdle.
100%. I mean, the parity is incredible. It's groundbreaking on so many levels. Prior to that decision, Paralympians were paid a fifth of Olympians in medal bonuses. That's, we can't have that. We have to create the parity. So that's another step in the right direction, that Paralympians are paid the same as Olympians in terms of medal bonuses. And then the next step on top of that is the inclusion of the word Paralympic in United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Yeah. So just adding the name, now the media has to say it. So if there's quotes from Sarah Herschel, the CEO, or whatever it might be, it's the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And so just the inclusion, it creates that awareness to then have individuals say, what's the Paralympics? Didn't know, because for so long, up until recently, it was always the USOC. So, and then the US Paralympics was a division of the USOC. Now it's one. So having that parity is just a huge step in the right direction.
Those great points. Some positive change recently. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now, do you think Paul was ahead of his time developing a prosthetic business as an amputee?
Absolutely. So I think, he came back and was in the hospital where he made his own leg. So it was so backed up, he went down and volunteered his services and started making rounds with the surgeons and advising patients, which it's like unheard of. That would never happen today, right? So, and then to turn that into a business, I would say, yeah, he was definitely ahead of his time, especially considering that I don't think there was a lot of amputees in prosthetic businesses. So it made him much more relatable to the patients, because obviously he knew what they were going through. And I think that's kind of a game changer when you're in prosthetics. Like, if you don't know, how can you relate? So that definitely set him apart. And the fact that he could walk really well, I think that inspired his patients as well, that, okay, you're doing this, you've been through it, so I can do it too. So yeah, I would say I think he was definitely ahead of his time.
And to build on that a little bit, here's a question that says, both Paul and Mike started prosthetic businesses after they became amputees. What challenges do you think they faced?
Well, I think my grandfather definitely faced the challenge of starting a business, because I don't think, he had any background. So I'm not sure he totally knew what he was doing when he went down this path. In the early days, I think he said they were like kind of ambulance chasers, like going to the hospital. Like, he would go there and find people and pitch their services. So it was definitely building a brand and helping people get to know him and what he was about. So I think that's one challenge. I also think making sure everything was accessible at that time. I think that was probably another challenge, like getting ramps and things like that. Like, I know his first office didn't have it until he could, get that installed. And just, I think, awareness, because back then, like, I don't know how people really learned about things like that besides word of mouth or people referring them. So I think getting the word out was probably a challenge as well.
Yeah, and I think for Mike, I could speak probably for Mike, knowing him pretty well, would be funding. I think as he built, to Katie's point, he didn't have the business background. He had kind of the engineering background. So when the accident happened, he realized for him, he's kind of on the higher end performing prosthetic, right? He's got his everyday prosthetic that was working for what he needed, but the moment he got on a snowmobile, snow bike, snowboard, just wasn't performing what he needed it to do. So he took it in his own hands, created something, and was like, wow, it works for me, it could work for a broader community. As he looked ahead, he's now celebrating 10 years of BioAdapt, but for him, he's the only one. Like, he's literally every day in the office making it. So how does he clone himself? And then how does he continue to have more of an impact? And it's funding is the biggest thing for him, because everybody, I mean, on a daily basis, somebody's reaching out saying, hey, can you create a moto knee or a VersaFoot for me? And so he's constantly making the current products while innovating. What is the next foot, the next knee? What does that look like? Version 3, version 4. And then at the same time, he's still a competitive athlete. He still competed on the Paralympic team, looking to compete in Beijing. He's still an X Games athlete. So he wears every single hat possible. I don't know when he sleeps, but I would definitely say funding is a big challenge.
And where do you all see the future of prosthetics going? What advances in technology could happen?
I can only imagine it growing and evolving in the technological space, because it's already going there. I mean, it's come so long from like the original like wooden knees, which we still have, you know, examples of those from the early days. But I can only imagine it's going to be almost robotic like in the future, where you think and then a sensor on your hand triggers, you know, emotion on your hand or your leg. And I would hope it just continues down that path, because it would just make things so much easier for people as well.
Yeah, and I would say to that, you know, I think the 3D modeling, the 3D printing, what we're seeing, and kind of that rapid turnaround to take what now is weeks and months to get all the different parts to create a moto knee or a VersaFoot or a prosthetic, and the molding and all that stuff, it just takes a lot of time. How do we condense that time? Because the moment somebody's injured or somebody needs a prosthetic, they need it today. They don't need it weeks, months down the road. They need to use it today. So how can technology help create something custom to that individual so they can live a fulfilling life and there's no limits on what's possible? So
in terms of the sport-specific prosthetics and the technology, do you all notice a difference between the winter sports and the summer sports? So, you know, we've seen the development of the cheetah legs for runners and for sprinters. So is there any kind of a gap in between the technology for sport-specific prosthetics?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's definitely things like, you know, Mike Schultz is building a knee specifically for skiing and for sports, and the VersaFoot, same thing. I think depending on the sport, I would imagine there's definitely at least altercations or, you know, adjustments that they would make depending on what it is for running, you know, skiing, depending on that. But I don't know exactly. I mean, people might specialize in that, but I'm not totally familiar.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think, you know, it takes visionaries like Paul and Mike and others to come in and say, okay, we have something here, but how do we improve it? How do we make it better and constantly make it better? Because that's what's going to help push the adaptive sports movement. That's what's going to push the Paralympic movement to boundaries we haven't seen. I think we're just getting started in how technology plays into athletes and how they're using prosthetic limbs to compete either at the highest level of the Paralympics or just be active. I think how technology can allow somebody to be active is pretty incredible. And I'll tell you, for the first time in 12 years, my wife and I went for a bike ride last week. I mean, those are things that you just kind of take for granted, but because we didn't have an arm bike, and now we have an arm bike, and it took months for us to get it and finally had it, just to see the smile and the tears running down our face to be able to do that. And through technology, she can. And through the use there that, you know, I can't swim. You don't want me in a pool. You don't want me swimming. You know, I'm terrible at swimming, so we can't just go do that together. She kicked my butt in that. So for us to be able to go out and go biking or skiing and anything like that through technology, it gives an individual freedom, and that's so powerful.
Yeah, I think to today's point, it's really incredible to see what technology and sports can do together. And I mean, so much opportunity that gives people an accessibility, which is what we wanted to highlight in this film and hope to spread the word of, because that's where I think we need to be going in the future and focusing, because it does give people new opportunities. And we all know how powerful sports are. And if we can get more people involved in that, the better.
And the important point then, coming back to make sure that this is accessible for everybody. Everyone has that opportunity to experience that freedom and physical activity. it.
Definitely.
Well, and I think it's an understanding for the common public that the costs of accessibility. When you sit down and you truly share that with individuals, they're mind blown. It's like, no, there's no way that it costs that much. No, it does. You can't just go to a store and buy a pair of Nike tennis shoes and go out for a run. You're going to need a new running prosthetic that's thousands of dollars. You're going to need an arm bike, or you want to go skiing. Okay, well, there's a rig, or at the mountain, you have to then rent it, and that's several $100s on top of a ski pass. So the costs associated. So I think, we're excited. We've partnered with a few adaptive sports organizations where they can, use the film as a fundraiser and as a tool to help educate, their communities on the importance of access and sharing what's possible, so that the everyday person can look at it and go, oh, wow, that's just what you guys do. I kind of saw it on the mountain, or I saw the arm bikes, but I didn't really get it. And here's a tool to help educate.
That's wonderful. Okay, last question. How have you seen adaptive sports or skiing change over time?
I would say just, look at, so you look at some of the early scenes in the film of the outrigger and the Canadian crutch to where the outrigger is now, or you look at the monoski and the technology behind the monoski and the shock system and some of that. I think the sky's the limit in terms of where the movement is going. Every year there's new adaptations to equipment. And so it's just, I think it's pretty amazing. I think I'm hoping to see more on mountains and out there, that you start seeing more equipment being used every day. So you're not out riding a bike on the side of the road and then cars are almost getting in accidents because they're like, what is that? What is that arm bike? What is that? And so I think if we can start seeing more equipment out there, that's what we're hopeful for.
And I would say, I think it's definitely evolved over time. Like skiing, especially, like we've seen so much change, even though like the outrigger design with my grandfather's, and it's still that same thing, but it's evolved. And like same thing with the monoski, like Bob Meserve in our film even said, he kind of had one custom made to what he wanted and how he wanted this. So I think we'll see more of that in the future, where it's built to that individual, not just here's your monoski, here's your outriggers, here's your equipment. It's going to be probably more customizable on how make it work for them, which I think is really the goal we want to highlight too, is accessibility and evolving the equipment over time to get more people out there skiing.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point, you'll see in Beijing, our star Andrew Kurka will be flying down the mountain in Beijing in a Toyota built monoski. So he's recently partnered with Toyota, and their TRD, Toyota Racing Development Team, the team behind NASCAR and all that, is customizing a rig for Andrew. So he's going to be in the wind tunnels, he's going to be on the mountains, and they're going to be customizing it. So to see a racing team working on a piece of adaptive equipment to make it the best possible is absolutely incredible. And it just shows where we're going.
Yeah. I was reading a bit about Toyota's efforts with this, and fascinating what they're doing. And there's one quote that stood out to me, something like, we're designing it so that the engine and the human being are one and the same. Mm-hmm. So the athlete is the engine in this technology, in this very individualized, specialized piece of equipment that they have. That's mind-blowing. So cool.
It's going to be mind-blowing. So we're looking forward to spending some time down in North Carolina with the TRD team and being a part of that. So it's pretty cool.
Stay tuned, huh?
Yes, stay tuned.
Yes. And everyone tune in for the Beijing 2022 Paralympics.
Yeah, so we'll have back-to-back games this summer. You'll have the Tokyo 2021 games. It'll be broadcast on NBC in September, and then 6 months later, in March, we'll have the Paralympic games in Beijing.
I think that's great.
It's amazing.
Everybody just keep on going. Your Olympic fix right into your Paralympic fix.
Exactly.
Exciting times for sure.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us, everyone out there. A big thank you to Katie and Jay for joining us and for spending their time with us tonight. I invite you to check out our other Alumni Association webinars. These are all free and open to all. You'll see the webinar site down there at the bottom. Also, be sure to check out more about Fresh Tracks and follow Katie and the film on Twitter. And the website is down below as well, too. Thank you all. I really appreciated having the chance to talk to you. And congratulations on an amazing film and just tremendous efforts.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been fantastic.
Yes, thank you very much. It was an honor.
Wonderful. Everybody, have a good night.